What up, though? Welcome to the Talk Radio Show. I know. Just like we call everything a mixtape. Besides what we term the mind, what we term the body, it's a thing that is us, that is me, that is you. The body does its own thing. When you sleep, the systems that keep you alive still moving and shaking. Your mind is moving and shaking. You read it as clutter, noise, and wish it would stop. The you in all this is absent, silent, dormant, untapped, so it seems. If you read or have read the words of anyone, if you hear or have heard the words of anyone, if you understood or understand these words, then you indirectly, actively seeking to be given thoughts or to be thought for. The story of the world's most dangerous woman. Who is Dr. Aafia Siddiqui? Dr. Aafia Siddiqui is a neuroscientist who studied at MIT and Brandeis. Specifically, she studied how to improve the education system for disabled children. While attending school, Aafia volunteered in a class to help real children benefit from the improvements she made. She also found time to become a leader in the Muslim Student Association. Friends still remember her tearful pleas for refugees. Despite the busy schedule of a student, Aafia gave presentations constantly about the humanitarian crisis in Bosnia. She also collected Qur'ans for prisoners, carrying the heavy boxes herself even when she was pregnant. On top of all her academic achievements, Dr. Siddiqui is also a Hafida, one who has memorized the Qur'an. In March of 2003, Dr. Siddiqui left her mother's house in Pakistan for the Karachi airport and disappeared along with her children. Dr. Siddiqui mysteriously reappeared in 2008 in Afghanistan, shortly before an incident that nearly killed her. Where was she for 5 years? A secretly recorded tape was handed to Siddiqui's lawyers, where a Pakistani superintendent of police admits being personally involved in Siddiqui's abduction. Her oldest son, Ahmed, remembers being stopped en route to the airport. He recounts that they were detained by 15 to 20 people, including a white lady. Another witness present saw Siddiqui slapped across her face. Ahmed saw his 6-month-old brother, Suleiman, fall to the ground. Suleiman was never seen again. This is the last of what Ahmed remembers before he was separated from his family and made to inhale something that knocked him out. On the same day that Siddiqui and her children disappeared, her mother was threatened by a man in a motorcycle helmet. He warned her to not report her daughter as missing. The Pakistani newspaper Dawn reported soon after that Siddiqui was in Pakistani custody, as did NBC Nightly News. Both would later retract the story. The FBI also met with her family. They said Siddiqui was alive but would answer no questions about her whereabouts. All of a sudden, the media reported different kinds of stories. Dr. Siddiqui was accused of being a courier for blood diamonds from Liberia. She had been in Boston at the time. The story was fake, but damage had already been done. In 2004, John Ashcroft declared to the nation that Aafia was the most dangerous woman in the world. Dr. Siddiqui was quickly being turned into a boogeyman to justify the war on terror. Why was she captured? In the 4 years between 2001 and 2005, it is estimated that the government of Pervez Musharraf handed over 400 to 800 prisoners to the U.S. Many were innocent, but their capture made the war on terror seem justified. A few weeks before Siddiqui disappeared, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was captured. He was waterboarded 183 times in his first month of imprisonment. I gave a lot of false information to satisfy what I believed the interrogators wished to hear. Supposedly, Muhammad named names leading to the capture of both Majid Khan and Siddiqui. Khan was taken to Guantanamo. Khan was tortured so much that he attempted suicide by biting through an artery. So, based on the words of men trying to escape torture, Siddiqui was caught and tortured herself. Where was Siddiqui between her abduction in 2003 and reappearance in 2008? Benham Mohammed, another innocent victim of the war on terror, who endured 7 years of detention and torture at the hands of the U.S., claimed that he saw Siddiqui at the notorious U.S.-run prison in Bagram, Afghanistan. She was the only female prisoner, and the men referred to her as the Gray Lady of Bagram. Night by night, they would hear her cries. Dr. Siddiqui, who was told by the judge that her years of secret detention were irrelevant to her trial, confirms that she was indeed held at Bagram. She was subjected to all kinds of torture, physical, psychological, and violations. In one horrific instance, guards desecrated a Quran and forced her to walk barefoot on the torn pages. The male prisoners, sickened by the screams of a woman who was clearly being tortured, staged a hunger strike in her defense. One day, without explanation, Siddiqui was dropped off. In a confused state, she was released on a street in Afghanistan. "This is your son. He has got that big. It has been that long." She was handed a bag by the people who released her. Some have suspected that Siddiqui was being sent off defenseless to her death, but something unexpected happened. She walked in a different direction when she heard the call to prayer. See, they are calling, "Come to Salah, come to success." She was stopped and detained. The bag she was handed supposedly contained instructions for explosives, but Dr. Siddiqui was never charged with terrorism. There are two versions of the events that followed while Siddiqui was detained at an Afghan police station. The U.S. claims she was behind a curtain, that she spotted a weapon and picked it up. Emerging from behind the curtain, she fired at Afghan police and American soldiers, hitting nothing. She wrestled men to the ground and was shot because they defended themselves. The supposed witnesses had conflicting testimonies, disagreeing on details like whether she was standing or sitting, and only the American witnesses backed this version of events. Dr. Siddiqui's version of the story puts her behind a curtain too, but little else is similar. Hearing American voices, she feared being returned to Bagram. She peered out, looking for a possible escape route. One of the armed men saw her and yelled, "She's free," before shooting her multiple times in the abdomen. She was nearly killed. The prosecution claimed bullet holes at the station were made by Siddiqui firing a weapon. But a video in the US's possession for months showed the same bullet holes there the day before Siddiqui arrived. While recovering, Dr. Siddiqui was restrained to the bed and denied guests, save for FBI agents. They claimed that she made confessions which would be convenient. Since no forensic evidence exists to support the story where Siddiqui went on a shooting rampage, a mere 7 days after being shot and nearly killed, Dr. Siddiqui was brought to New York with no extradition to face charges of attempted murder. Lady Al Qaeda, the most dangerous woman in the world, was never charged with terrorism. Ahmed, who disappeared with his mother in 2003, was released to his family in 2008. He was interrogated upon his return to Pakistan. It is still unknown where he was detained for all those years. The middle child, Miriam, was dropped off mysteriously. A note was tied to her with her grandmother's address written on it. She was only able to speak English and with an American accent. It took a DNA test to confirm that she was Siddiqui's daughter. The third and youngest child, Suleiman, remains missing since the 2003 abduction and is feared popped off. Dr. Siddiqui's trial in New York was a sham. She was not allowed to pick her defense. The jury was not sequestered, free to read and be influenced by propaganda against Siddiqui. And though she was never charged with the terrorism, the prosecution raised the specter of terror constantly. The prosecution asked her about chemistry training she had in school. Realizing that they brought up this irrelevant detail to paint her as a bomb maker or worse, she exclaimed, "You can't build a case on hate. You should build it on facts." Siddiqui was sentenced to 86 years in prison. Realizing her trial to be a sham, her parting words to the judge were none the less compassionate. "Mr. Judge, I forgive you. Thank you. I wish other people were like you. You will now be spending the rest of your life in a federal penitentiary. I beg to differ from you. My fate lies with Allah, and my destiny is with my God. The decision of my fate is my God's, not yours. And Mr. Judge, I thank you for letting me graduate from another MIT, the Manhattan Institute of Theatrical Arts." Siddiqui was sent to the notorious Carswell prison, where abuse of the female prisoners has been rampant. And though she was never charged with terrorism, Dr. Siddiqui's imprisonment includes harsh terror enhancements. Her family was repeatedly denied visitation. When asked about this, a guard answered with surprising honesty, "The normal rules don't apply to your sister." Meanwhile, Siddiqui's family has faced constant harassment, would-be kidnapping attempted to abduct her children, and Siddiqui's mother has received death threats. United States Attorney, Southern District of New York. For immediate release, September 2008, U.S. Attorney's Office. Aafia Siddiqui indicted for attempting to kill United States nationals in Afghanistan and 6 additional charges. The United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York announced today the indictment of Aafia Siddiqui on charges related to her attempted murder and assault of United States nationals and officers and employees. Siddiqui is scheduled to be arraigned on the indictment on Thursday, September 4th, 2008 at 11:30 a.m. by the United States District Judge, according to the indictment filed in Manhattan Federal Court. On July 18, 2008, a team of United States servicemen and law enforcement officers and other assisting them attempted to interview Aafia Siddiqui in Ghazni, Afghanistan, where she had been detained by local police the day before. The United States interview team included, among others, 3 officers and employees of the United States Army, 2 officers and employees of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and 2 United States Army contract interpreters. The interview of Siddiqui was to take place in a second floor meeting room at the compound where Siddiqui was being held, unbeknownst to the United States interview team. Unsecured behind a curtain, Siddiqui obtained one of the United States Army officers' M4 rifle and attempted to fire it. Siddiqui repeatedly stated her intent and desire to kill Americans. Siddiqui then assaulted one of the United States Army interpreters as he attempted to obtain the M4 rifle from her. Siddiqui subsequently assaulted one of the FBI agents and one of the U.S. Army officers as they attempted to subdue her. On the previous day, July 17, 2008, when Siddiqui was detained by Afghan authorities, a number of items were in her possession, including handwritten notes that referred to a mass casualty attack and that listed various locations in the United States, including Plum Island, the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, Wall Street, and the Brooklyn Bridge. Other notes in Siddiqui's possession referred to the construction of dirty bombs and discussed various ways to attack enemies, including by destroying reconnaissance drones, using underwater bombs, and using gliders. Siddiqui also possessed a computer thumb drive that contained correspondence referring to specific cells, attacks by certain cells, and enemies. Other documents on the thumb drive discuss recruitment and training. Siddiqui, a 36-year-old Pakistani woman, resided in the United States from in or about 1991 until June 2002 and obtained degrees from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Brandeis University. Siddiqui is charged in the indictment with 1 count of attempting to kill United States nationals outside the United States, 1 count of attempting to kill United States officers and employees, 1 count of armed assault on United States officers and employees, 1 count of using and carrying a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence, 3 counts of assault of United States officers and employees. If convicted, Siddiqui faces a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison on each of the attempted murder and armed assault charges, life in prison on the firearm charges, and 8 years in prison on each of the remaining assault charges. Assistant United States Attorney Christopher L. Levine is in charge of the prosecution. The charges and allegations contained in the indictment are merely accusations, and the defendant is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty. Let's shake it. This is from Spiegel Online. The Most Dangerous Woman in the World by Julianne von Mittelstadt. Aafia Siddiqui was once considered a brilliant scientist. Then the U.S. government called her the new face of Al-Qaeda, a Pakistani woman who ranked among America's top terrorism suspects. Now the MIT-educated mother of 3 is in custody, claiming her long disappearance was a wrongful abduction by the CIA. On July 2008, men coming from evening prayers in the Bazazi Mosque in Ghazni, a provincial capital south of Kabul, paused when they saw a woman outside the building. They formed a circle around the stranger, who was wearing a blue burqa. She was cowering on the ground with two small bags at her side, holding the hand of a boy of about 12. One of the men, fearing this peculiar woman, after 2 weeks, Aafia Siddiqui was flown from the U.S. Air Force Bagram Airport in Afghanistan to New York. She was now wearing a tracksuit, had two bullet entry wounds in her abdomen, and weighed around 40 kilograms or 90 pounds. Siddiqui is 5 foot 4 inches tall. Siddiqui is a Pakistani citizen and mother of 3 children. Attorney General John Ashcroft placed her, the only woman, on his Deadly Seven list. She has not been charged now with being a collaborator or accomplice in terrorist attacks. She studied biology on a scholarship at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and earned a PhD in neuroscience at Brandeis University, where she was considered an outstanding scientist. 5 years ago, Siddiqui disappeared from her home in Karachi, together with her 3 children, Ahmed, 7, Miriam, 5, and Suleiman, 6 months. The 2 older children are American citizens. Siddiqui claims the Americans abducted her and locked her away in a secret prison, and that she was tortured there. Her children, she says, were taken away, and 2 of them are still missing. On that same March 1st, Siddiqui sent an email from Karachi to her professor, Robert Secular, at Brandeis University outside Boston. She was looking for a job. I would prefer to work in the United States, she wrote, noting that there were no jobs in Karachi for a woman with her educational background. A few days later, Siddiqui disappeared. Early in the morning on the day of her disappearance, she left her parents' house, together with her 3 children and not very much luggage. Siddiqui says she was kidnapped that day on her way to the airport. She says her abductors took away Ahmed, Miriam, and the baby. The last thing she remembers, she says, was receiving an injection in her arm. She says that when she regained consciousness, she was in a prison cell, which she believes was on a military base in Afghanistan, because she heard aircraft taking off and landing. She claims that she was held in solitary confinement for more than 5 years, and that it was always the same Americans who interrogated her, without mask or uniforms. For days, she says, they would play tape recordings of her children's terrified screams, and she claims that she was forced to write hundreds of pages about the construction of dirty bombs and attacks using viruses. The baby, Suleiman, was taken away immediately, she says. They showed her a photograph of Ahmed, the 7-year-old, lying in a pool of blood. The only one of her children they occasionally showed her, she says, was Miriam, as a vague outline behind a pane of frosted glass. According to the Asian Human Rights Commission, there are 52 secret prisons in the country into which thousands of Pakistanis are believed to have disappeared since the beginning of the war on terrorism. A number of other prisoners held at Bagram Air Base, the site of the most important U.S. detainee camp in Afghanistan, say they heard a woman screaming. Who is Aafia Siddiqui? Her sister, Fauja Siddiqui, pulls out several photo albums that she hopes will help answer this question. The books are filled with images of garden parties, family gatherings. and children's birthdays. Aafia, Fauzia's younger sister by 5 years, is shown holding various pets, including a hamster, a cat, a goat, and a lamb. The Siddiquis are a model Pakistani family, modern and devout at the same time. The father was a surgeon, the mother is a housewife, and the family has lived in the British city of Manchester and in Zambia. All three children studied abroad. Mohammed, an architect, lives in Houston, and Fauzia, a neurologist, worked at one of the best hospitals in Boston and lived in the same house as her sister for several years. She returned to Karachi some time ago and now works at the city's Aga Khan University. She says she would like to establish an institute to train neurologists. Helping the poor, says Fauzia, is a tradition in her family. Her sister Aafia, she says, also believed in helping the poor and was always there for other people. My sister is innocent. She could never harm anyone. Something is simply not right, she says. There must have been a mistake. She picks up her photo album again, holding on to them like a shipwreck victim, clinging to a life preserver. Aafia at the piano. Aafia in a student dormitory together with four Chinese students. A young woman who likes to pose for the camera and loves colorful silk dresses, but rarely wears a headscarf. Her husband, Amjad Khan, was an anesthesiologist. His father owned a pharmaceutical factory, and the parents considered him a good catch. When he arrived in Boston, he came without presents or flowers. Instead, he could only complain about how much money the family had spent for a small ceremony, a hotel room, and a white silk dress and many pearls for Aafia, which made her look like a princess. It would have been better to donate the money to charity, he said. Weren't there enough needy people in Pakistan? They fought frequently, and Khan beat his wife and the children. Shortly after the attacks of September 11th, Siddiqui flew to Karachi with her children, only to return to Boston a few months later. After 6 months, the couple left the apartment, gave away the furniture, and on June 26, 2002, moved to Pakistan. When Amjad Khan separated from his wife a few weeks later, she was already pregnant with Suleiman. Under Islamic law, divorce at that point was not possible. She earned a PhD in neuroscience and wrote her thesis on learning through imitation. Her sister says Siddiqui had wanted to start a preschool in Boston, where children would be taught using techniques she had studied. Siddiqui collected money for Bosnian war orphans, for Care International. Imam Abdullah Farouk, a black convert who wears a kaftan over his blue jeans and polo shirt, remembers an event where Siddiqui collected shoes for Bosnian refugees and said, sobbing, "How can you have more than one pair of shoes when our brothers in Bosnia are freezing?" Sister Aafia was very committed, highly intelligent, and extremely concerned about the fate of Muslims worldwide, and she believed that she could make a difference in the world, says Farouk. But there are also serious allegations against Siddiqui, most of them revealed only after her disappearance. but it is clear that the authorities have been unable to confirm any of these allegations. It was apparently enough evidence to get the Muslim missionary caught in the net of terrorist hunters in the panic-filled years after September 11th. The husband, Khan, is no longer available for questioning. He has disappeared, and his family refuses to provide any information on his whereabouts. No one knows exactly why it was Aafia Siddiqui who was declared the most dangerous woman in the world for 4 years. However, on May 26, 2004, then Attorney General John Ashcroft stood against a backdrop of 7 enormous black and white photographs of most wanted terrorists, among them Aafia Siddiqui. He stepped up to a microphone and said that the face of Al-Qaeda had changed. The new Al-Qaeda, according to Ashcroft, is young, female, and travels with family members. It constitutes a clear and present danger for America, he said. Normally, suicide bombers are swiftly dealt with in Afghanistan. They are shot before they can blow themselves up. Upon searching the 2 bags, police found no explosives, but small plastic bottles containing chemicals, a computer, and documents written in Urdu and English about dirty bombs, biological weapons, and recruiting jihadists. In seeking to explain her presence at the mosque, Siddiqui says she had been ordered to follow a plan and that the trip to Ghazni was a condition of her release. Her guard, she said, had placed the documents and chemicals in her bags. Her attorney, Elaine Whitfield Sharp, says Siddiqui was set up. It is also odd that when Siddiqui was brought to the police station, she said the boy was her stepson, that his name was Ali Hassan, and that he was an orphan she had adopted. There is a blurred video made by the police in Ghazni who, eager to show off their big catch, had called a press conference. In the video, Siddiqui says that her name is Saliha or Sahia, and that she is from the city of Multan in Pakistan. A DNA test performed a short time later determined that the boy was Ahmed Siddiqui's real son. Today, Ahmed lives with Fauja Siddiqui in Karachi. He is severely disturbed emotionally, has nightmares, and tells confusing stories about where he spent the past few years. On the day after the arrest, a counterterrorism unit from Kabul turned up in Ghazni to investigate the case. The team included 10 to 12 Americans. They entered the small room where she was being held, which was partitioned by a curtain and had only one door. Siddiqui was sitting or standing behind the curtain. An Afghan who wishes to remain anonymous says that one of the Americans went up to her immediately and that shots were fired a few seconds later. Siddiqui said she passed out. She had been shot and was taken to a hospital at Bagram, where she underwent surgery and barely survived. What exactly happened in those few seconds before she was shot is important, because the indictment brought by the district attorney in New York describes a version of the events that differs considerably from Siddiqui's story. It alleges that she grabbed a U.S. soldier's M4 assault rifle, released the safety catch, and fired several shots, but without hitting anyone, all within seconds. One of the soldiers, acting in self-defense, allegedly shot her. A person would have to be familiar with the M4 to know how to release its safety catch. And would a U.S. soldier put down his weapon when a wanted Al-Qaeda terrorist was sitting in the same room? A psychological assessment of Siddiqui has lain before the judge in New York since early November. The report says she is not competent to stand trial. If the case does go to trial, and if the court takes on the military's version of the indictment, It will not include any mention of Siddiqui's alleged terrorist connections. There would be no need to prove any of the alleged terrorist acts. The case of Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, punishment for a terrorist or a mockery of justice. Siddiqui was a passionate Muslim activist while in the United States. In 2002, the FBI questioned her for potential ties to Al Qaeda. And in 2003, while in Pakistan, Siddiqui was accused of being an Al Qaeda financier. Immediately, she was placed on the FBI's wanted for questioning list and went mysteriously missing. In 2008, Siddiqui and her 11-year-old son were both arrested in Ghazni, Afghanistan. When the FBI came to the scene for interrogation, Siddiqui allegedly tried to shoot a U.S. soldier as she missed a second U.S. soldier shot her in the abdomen and left her unconscious. Although this was a fabricated lie by the U.S., given that no fingerprints were found on the rifle she allegedly used to shoot the U.S. soldier, Siddiqui was tried by the New York Federal District Court on charges of attempted murder and assault. In 2010, after 18 months in detention, she was sentenced to 86 years in prison. Aafia Siddiqui and her 3 children, 7, 5, and 6 months old at the time, mysteriously disappeared in 2003 from Pakistan. Her mother, Asmat Siddiqui, said that Aafia and her children left their home in Karachi on March 28, 2003 to go to the airport, but they never got there. In 2010, her eldest son testified that as soon as they left their house, 20 people in 4 vehicles, including a woman from the Pakistani intelligence, were waiting for them on the next street where the family was then abducted. Siddiqui was placed in a car alone, where she was hooded and drugged. The Pakistani authorities believe that Siddiqui spent 5 years at the U.S. detention center in Bagram, Afghanistan, where she was horribly abused. This well-educated neuroscientist with degrees from MIT and a PhD from Brandeis became the Gray Lady of Bagram, Prisoner 650, a ghost of herself who kept fellow detainees awake with hallucinations about her missing children and her haunting screams. British journalist Yvonne Ridley reports the cries of this helpless woman echoed with such torment in the jail that it prompted prisoners to go on a hunger strike. In Guantanamo, she has been brutally violated by male detainees as she was kept in their wing. She was nude without clothes and without curtains in the washroom so that male guards could watch her. In order to get her clothes, she was forced to step on the Quran. John Ashcroft, the U.S. Attorney General, described Siddiqui as an armed and dangerous terrorist facilitator who used her education against the U.S. Dr. Aafia Siddiqui was randomly selected by the CIA based on Irving Lowenstein's recommendation. Also known as Libby, Lowenstein was President Bush's national security advisor of Israeli nationality. Working closely with Vice President Cheney, Libby was instructed to select warm bodies for abduction, torture, and sentenced to prison so that President Bush's setup of yellow cake uranium being illegally imported to Iran was promoted as planned. This is from Gordon Duff, a Marine Vietnam veteran who interviewed several Pakistani leaders, as well as the White House and Pentagon intelligence officials. Writes, all agreed on one thing. The case against Dr. Aafia was fabricated by the U.S. regime, and her prosecution was orchestrated by Israeli intelligence. The Musharraf regime in Pakistan assisted every step of the way. Today, Aafia is being held at the Federal Medical Center in Texas in a woman's prison. The New York Times. Court to hear new reports on Pakistani scientist's fitness for trial by Benjamin Weissner. July 5th, 2009. Ms. Siddiqui, 37, a Pakistani neuroscientist who was brought to Manhattan last summer for prosecution after a court-ordered evaluation found that she was unfit for trial as a result of mental disease. A judge ordered her sent to Federal Medical Center Carswell in Fort Worth for further evaluation. Ms. Siddiqui was taken into custody last July in Ghazni, Afghanistan, after she was found loitering outside the provincial governor's compound with suspicious items in her handbag, the authorities have said. While she was detained, the indictment charges she picked up an unsecured rifle and fired at least 2 shots toward a soldier who was part of an American team of FBI agents and military personnel who were about to question her. No one was hit. She was charged with attempted murder and other charges and has pleaded not guilty. The defense's psychologist L. Thomas Kucharski, a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, concluded that Ms. Siddiqui was suffering from a delusional disorder and depression. He cited various statements, like one in which she said she had been injected with a substance. A government expert, Dr. Gregory B. Sathoff, a psychiatry professor at the University of Virginia, said she has had a strong motivation to appear incompetent. Another prosecution expert, Dr. Sally C. Johnson, a psychiatry professor at the University of North Carolina, wrote that although Ms. Siddiqui appeared frail and timid, her potential for aggression toward herself or others might be underestimated. This is from City Room, blogging from the 5 boroughs. A reversal on terror defendant's fitness for trial by Benjamin Weissner. Benjamin Weisser. February 2009. A federal prosecutor said Monday that 2 psychiatrists who have examined Aafia Siddiqui, a Pakistani neuroscientist charged with trying to kill an American soldier and FBI agents while in custody in Afghanistan, said she was not suffering from psychological illness that would render her unfit for trial. That assessment was in contrast to a previous evaluation of Ms. Siddiqui's fitness. As earlier court-ordered evaluation by the Bureau of Prisons personnel had concluded that she was suffering from mental illness and was not competent for trial. The new evaluations were carried out by 2 government-retained psychiatrists who had done a tremendous amount of work in the case, including meeting separately with Ms. Siddiqui in the Federal Medical Center Carswell in Fort Worth, Texas, where she is being held. They have both concluded independently, he said, that there is no sign of a mental disease or defect that would in any way interfere with the defendant's ability to stand trial. Siddiqui, who was extradited to the U.S. in August, was shot in the abdomen during the July skirmish, leading to her charges. She has since refused proper medical care as well as communication with her legal counsel. Siddiqui's family has insisted that she is not an al-Qaeda agent and that the FBI has publicized misleading information about her. Boston-educated scientist stands trial, accused of aiding al-Qaeda. July 2009. Authorities say while she was detained, she shot at FBI agent and U.S. military who were about to question her. No one was hit. On Monday, Siddiqui repeatedly interrupted her competency hearing to declare her innocence and says She's not anti-American. From City Room, Pakistani suspect interrupts competency hearing. Benjamin Weiser, 2009. Aafia Siddiqui repeatedly interrupted a hearing on Monday about her competency to stand trial. She declared in a series of rambling, often disjointed outbursts that she had not shot anyone and was not against the United States. I didn't fire any bullets, she declared at one point. I'm really not against America. I never was. I still am not, she said later. Miss Siddiqui, 37, who studied at Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Brandeis University, was taken into custody last July in Ghazni, Afghanistan, after she was found loitering outside the provincial governor's compound with suspicious items in her handbag, the authorities have said. Pakistani scientist accused of shooting at FBI interrupts New York competency hearing with outburst. Larry Neumeister, July 2009. Aafia Siddiqui repeatedly spoke Monday to spectators, a U.S. Marshal's deputy sitting behind her, her lawyers, and even a team of 5 prosecutors and aides in front of her at the start of the afternoon session of the day-long proceeding. They were her first public comments since she was brought to the United States from Afghanistan 11 months ago. If convicted of the charges, Siddiqui, 37, would face a maximum of 30 years in prison and a maximum penalty of life in prison. Throughout Monday's hearing, Siddiqui rubbed her wrist, reddened by what she said was rough treatment by jailhouse guards. Psychologists say she's had delusions that include seeing her 3 children in her cell and being visited by flying infants and dark angels. A psychologist for the defense testified Siddiqui suffers from delusional disorder and depression and is unfit for trial. 2 mental health experts from the government testified she's fit for trial because her behavior reflects malingering or grossly exaggerated psychological symptoms aimed at getting a result, such as avoiding trial. Aafia is the neuroscientist. They should ask her. Kucharski testified that her prospects might be worse if she were found incompetent, because it could trigger a court order or forced medication to treat symptoms so that she could become competent for trial. And if her symptoms are not treatable, she could remain institutionalized for life, he said. Before she left court, Siddiqui insisted she's not paranoid or psychotic and described her fears that her statements Monday might be her last. It's probably the last opportunity I'm going to get, she said, noting the possibility she will be subjugated to forced medication. I've seen people on the drugs. They can't talk. At least twice during the hearing, she indicated she will not cooperate with her court-appointed lawyer, Dawn M. Carty. Carty said outside court that her client's behavior supported her argument that she's unfit for trial. The legalizer. U.S.-trained scientist interrupts competency hearing, saying she's not against America. Larry Neumeister, 2009. I'm really not against America. I never was. During one of her outbursts Monday, she called out, I did not shoot anybody. Just before a lunch break, Siddiqui turned toward the spectators again and called out, I'm really not against America. I never was. America as a nation has been framed to look bad. She appeared in court against her will and repeatedly noted that in her statements to, and repeatedly noted that in her statements to spectators. I don't like being cuffed and stripped and made to attend these proceedings, she said. I'm all injured, aching all over, she said. I do not want to be here. Siddiqui seemed particularly disturbed by strip searches required before court appearances. Siddiqui repeatedly stated she was dead after one strip search and that she said she was convinced video of the search was distributed on the internet. The governor of Pakistan on Monday renewed its offer to Aafia Siddiqui. The offer was conveyed by Ambassador Hussein Haqqani, who telephoned her on Monday and urged her to cooperate with the government's effort to seek her release. According to an embassy spokesman, the ambassador advised her to take the legal route and offered to hire any lawyer she names to defend her in the court. Do the right thing.